Here we are, back with Chapter 3, Video 2. Instead of starting with a joke this time, I'm actually going to start off with a science fact I saw the other day. So, the fact is that a deer can jump higher than the average house. And I know you're thinking like, wow, that is crazy. I cannot believe that I can jump higher than the average house. Well, the real thing is, if a house could jump, well, that would be the more impressive thing. So, there you go. Average house can't jump, therefore a deer can jump higher. So, haha, take it all in. Now we'll get back to the real reason you came, to learn a little bit more about the Civil War. So we're going to start with the fall of Fort Sumter. So again, last time we had a discussion, we talked a little bit about, again, some more lead up to the Civil War. We now have the Confederacy with Jefferson Davis in charge of the southern states and their own constitution. But now we're going to get to the point where it's actually fighting is going to take place. It's actually going to be the start of the Civil War, which is going to be the falling of this fort here. So, with all these different compromises that took place that we talked about before, and I'm not going to keep bringing those up, there was another one known as Critterden's Compromise. Now, Critterden's Compromise, again, this was after the Confederacy was formed, and Lincoln basically tells them that we don't need to compromise, we just need to come together and form the Union once again. But the South, they failed to get this idea of coming together and becoming one whole country again. So he now knows that war is almost inevitable. Now what he wants to do, he wants to resupply Fort Sumter, which is in Charleston Harbor. Now, if you're thinking a little bit about geography, and geography is going to be a big part of this slide here, Charleston Harbor is going to be in the South. So technically speaking, the South is their own country, and here comes a northerner with Abraham Lincoln and a supply ship from the North, the United States, going and resupplying a base in South Carolina. The South, they are not going to be okay with that. And Lincoln looks at it as the most vital harbor in the South. And he wants to resupply. He wants to make sure that it is going to be ready in case a war is going to break out. But again, to kind of look at the major theme and the major impact, Jefferson Davis, he pretty much has a choice here. He can, first of all, he can attack that ship. But again, that is almost inevitably is going to be a declaration of war. You have the Confederates going and actually attacking a supply ship. So that's the first thing. He could let the supply ship come and resupply Fort Sumter, but how does that make him look? Absolutely weak, because here he is supposed to be the president. He's supposed to be in charge of the South, and you have a northerner coming in and taking over a base and having a foreign army there. They're not going to be okay with that. So Jefferson Davis, he tries to find like a little bit of a middle ground here, and that middle ground is going to be, he is going to just simply request the surrender of the fort. Major Robert Anderson, he's in charge of it. He goes up, or he sends someone there to basically tell them that they're going to need to surrender, give up everything that's going to be inside. If they do not, they are going to be attacked. Now Anderson, Major Robert Anderson, he is not willing to do so. So Jefferson Davis and the Confederates, they bombard Fort Sumter for 33 straight hours. After those 33 straight hours, tired, fatigued, running out of supplies, they are going to surrender. Now, with this, it's kind of odd because you would think that a lot of people would possibly be killed in this, but after those 33 hours, nobody was killed. Nobody was injured, but they are going to be forced to surrender. And the big thing now, Fort Sumter is going to fall, so the most vital harbor that the Union believes is going to be within the war is now going to fall to the Confederacy. And then also probably even bigger, the Upper South, they are going to begin to secede. Because shortly after the fall of Fort Sumter, Abraham Lincoln, he is going to ask for 75,000 more soldiers for the next 90 days. Now, the Upper South, they are the states that have slavery, that they are not at that point yet where they wanted to secede, but now that they're told they actually have to go and fight, go to war to try to end slavery, they are going to be against it. So the Upper South, they are going to secede. Now, Lincoln's next motivation is going to be holding the border states together. So Lincoln, he is going to impose martial law in Maryland. And basically martial law, the big thing about it is state citizens, they lose their right. Freedom of speech is gone. Freedom of the press certainly could be gone. You could be arrested at any time. And that's something that Lincoln did a lot of, getting rid of the writ of habeas corpus a little bit later, which we'll talk about towards the end. But basically, martial law, you have the military who is going to come in. The military is now going to come up with the rules and regulations. You're not going to have your local police force or anything like that. The military is going to be in charge. Now, a lot of people in Maryland, absolutely, they were upset with this. But the reason he needed to keep Maryland, the Upper South was already seceding. Virginia, already had seceded. And again, thinking about geography, Virginia is right next to D.C. The Potomac River is going to be kind of that natural border between the two. If Maryland falls, the United States capital, D.C., would be completely surrounded. So he's going to impose martial law, and again, it makes a lot of people upset, but they are going to do that to make sure that everyone is going to stay together. Now, the next one, Kentucky, they try to remain neutral, but their hands are in a way going to be tied. Yes, again, they're considered to be a southern state, but the Confederacy actually make a big mistake here. The Confederacy take troops and station them within their own state, within the state of Kentucky. And hopefully that makes sense. Basically, again, Confederates take soldiers and put them in Kentucky. Now, here you have a state, again, who is trying to remain neutral. As soon as the Confederates come in, and as soon as they are there and stationed within that state, they are going to vote, and they are now going to join the side of the Union, which now, all of a sudden, Union Army is going to come in and try to expel those Confederates. And the last probably big one is going to be Missouri. Now, Missouri, again, votes to stay in the Union. This is where there was probably the most tension. You had a lot of people who wanted secession. You had a lot of people who were pro-Union. But nonetheless, Missouri, they are going to vote to stay within the Union. Now, the opposing sides, and we're not going to get too much into really like the money or who has more troops or things like that, because you guys will be doing your own research on that. But the opposing sides, a couple things to look at, was definitely going to be the military officers. Now, Robert E. Lee, he had a choice to make. He either had to figure out if he was going to join the Union or the Confederacy. And as you can see on here, he is going to join the Confederacy, which is definitely going to be a big loss for the North. The Union, they thought he was going to be their leader. They thought he was going to be their general. But General Lee, he is from Virginia. Because he is from Virginia, he did not think it was right to fight against his friends, fight against his family, fight against where he basically grew up. And it's kind of strange to think of, too, because he was against slavery. He thought it was morally, he thought politically, it was wrong. But because he was from Virginia, his hands were tied. He is going to end up joining the Confederacy. And then hundreds of military officers also resigned to join the Confederacy. So, one of the things I kind of think of when we talk about the pros and cons of who had better leaders, who had a better strategy, the Confederates definitely have the advantage here with Robert E. Lee and also with the hundreds of different military officers who are going to resign to join the Confederacy as well. And then the last one we'll talk about today, the political situation. As we've discussed, as we talked about before, Lincoln still does not want to end slavery. He knows that if he is going to be tough on that issue, if he is going to say he wants to end slavery, that there is no chance the Confederacy is going to join again. So his focus, he wants to pretty much preserve the Union. He just wants to make one whole country once again. Now, realizing that that probably is not going to happen without a war, he is going to go to Congress and ask for what's known as a conscription law. Now, conscription is something that is still around today. All it simply is, it's the draft. So Congress is going to pass conscription laws for states that could not raise enough soldiers. So if they ask for, say, 10,000 volunteers from each state, and say Maine could only get 5,000 people to volunteer, conscription law would state you have to get 5,000 more people. Now, whether it's by their birthday, whether it's by each city has to give 3 or 4 people, everyone's going to be a little bit different. But they now have a conscription law where they have to give up and they have to volunteer as soldiers or citizens from their states. And then probably the most notable, he suspends the writ of habeas corpus, which I talked a little bit about before. But basically, once you're in the United States, if you are arrested, you have certain rights. And one of the ones that, and every time I ask, I say, what are your rights? First thing people think about is something known as your Miranda rights, which if you've watched any court TV show, any movie with court or somebody getting arrested, you know what the Miranda rights are. You know, you have the right to remain silent. Those are going to be kind of the start of it there. But more rights that you have to have an initial trial telling you what you are being arrested for and what you are on trial for. That is known as your writ of habeas corpus. So if those are suspended, you could be arrested, you could be put in jail, and you could sit there for possibly 2 to 3 months without having that initial trial of being told what you are arrested for. And this was not going to be done just because Lincoln wanted to show he was powerful and who was in charge. He did this because he wanted to make sure that people who were fighting for secession in the North, that they were not going to be vocal, that they were not going to be allowed to go and tell people to do this, because if you were going to be arrested. So that's the political situation in the North. Lincoln has a lot of support. He has a lot of power. Jefferson Davis in the South has the complete opposite. He struggles to gain support due to states' rights. And this was one thing that they were not willing to give up. Even when they wrote their Constitution, it was that the states had to have their own rights and the Confederate government would not be able to overrule it. So Jefferson Davis wants to have conscription laws, but states simply say, nah, we don't want them. We want to have our own country, but we're not going to fight a war that way. So Jefferson Davis is going to struggle immensely for those reasons. And looking at the political situation, again, we'll look about more with the pros and cons. You have to figure what's going to be more important, having better generals like the Confederate has, or looking at the Union side and realizing that the government is going to be backing Lincoln.